Good morning. Welcome. I'm Paul Teske. I'm the Dean of the School of Public Affairs here at CU Denver, and we're delighted that you're here this morning. Bit of a fall chill in the air. It is October, and it is about a month away from the election. So this is an important topic at an important time. And that the reasons we're doing this event now, it is Hispanic Heritage Month, and so I wanted to honor that. And CU Denver, as many of you know, is a Hispanic serving institution officially from the US government, and that comes with some important things, and we're excited about that. And of course, the election upcoming. There's a lot of stuff going on with the election, obviously, and the Latino vote is very important nationally and in some states, the swing states like Nevada, Arizona. It's important here in Colorado in many races, including the 8th Congressional District, which I believe has two Latino candidates. I heard on CPR the first time, maybe in Colorado, that's happening. It's a very close race. And so the Latino vote is critically important. And, historically, it varies around the country, but the Latino vote's been about 2/3 in favor of Democrats, but there's been a lot of talk in recent election that's been shifting and changing. So that's one of the topics we want to talk about. Turnout is obviously a huge issue in any election. Our Denver clerk and recorder, Paul Lopez, who's on the panel, brought some material about voting, and obviously getting people out to vote, whoever they vote for, whichever party they vote for is important. So we're pleased that he's here with that information. Today, of course, is not a partisan event. We want to get analytic thoughts, perspectives from our rock star panel on changes in the Latino vote and what to expect. But we also try to model here in these events the kind of university goal of disagreeing but doing it agreeably and having that civil discourse. And we've been fortunate to do that, and I'm sure we'll have more of that today, so I appreciate that. This is part of an election series we're doing with the School of Public Affairs and CU Denver. Next Friday night in this room, we'll be talking about ballot issues. And if you live in Denver, you're going to be voting on about 25 state and local ballot issues, from abortion to gun taxes to ranked choice voting and all kinds of things. It's a little bewildering. I got my blue book in the mail the other day. Lots of homework for all of us, but that'll help give you some background on some of those issues. We're delighted to be partnering today with the LRPC, the Latino Research and Policy Center here at CU Denver, which is headed by Carlos Hippolito Delgado. And excited to be doing that. And our community engagement director, Milo Marquez, will be moderating the panel today. We're also, the event is supported by Antonio Farias, the head of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the University of Colorado, Denver. And we really appreciate that. And also some support from the Worth Chair and the Herrick Roth Speaker Series at CU Denver. Huge thanks to Dee Dee Flynn in the back, who's done all the event coordinating on this, and other SPA staff that you met at the front door or elsewhere that help with these events. We really appreciate that. We have a lot of people online, and so everybody's mic'd up, and when we'll do the questions through the mics. We think we have about 30 or 35 people online, so welcome to our online audience out there. I do want to recognize a few folks that are here. Everybody that's here today is important, but a few recognitions. Our interim chancellor, Ann Schmeezing, is here. We're delighted that she could make it. Our provost, Constancio Nakuma, is here. Thank you, Constancio. Several members of the leadership team, associate vice chancellors. I saw Charan Kayalulu, Beth Myers, and perhaps others. I apologize if I'm missing you. Our regent from CD7, Nilbert Chavez, is here. Thank you, Nilbert. And in addition to being regent, Nilbert's day job is working on the displaced Ararian 9th Street process, and we're really thrilled that he does such great work there. I saw James Mejia, our friend from Metro State, here. Thanks for being here. And again, I apologize if I'm missing some other folks. I know we have students in the audience. I know we have faculty members, and thank you all for being here, as well as others. On the slides that were going around before, we had our land acknowledgement for the university, that we're on the ancestral lands of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes, and I want to acknowledge that. And then specifically more focused on today's issues. This campus was created in an urban redevelopment project more than 50 years ago that displaced a working class Hispanic neighborhood. And again, the work that Norbert is doing over at 9th Street and the Displaced Agrarian Scholarships are efforts to acknowledge and memorialize some of that past activity. Just finally, some logistics. Bathrooms are around the corner. We'll be done around 10 o'clock, but we're not kicked out of the room. And if you want to stay and chat, and if some of the panelists can stay, talk with them, that's great. If you need to leave sooner, feel free to do that. We appreciate that. For the questions part of this, and around 9:45, maybe 20:10, Milo probably turn to questions from the audience. We have 3x5 cards that are available, and you can write questions down, and we'll come and pick those up and make sure we try to answer as many of those as possible. And so that's sort of the end of my part of this. I want to introduce Milo Marquez. Milo, as we said, is the community outreach coordinator for the LRPC here. He's in previous jobs, he's worked a lot in Latino policy organizations in Colorado. He told me back in the day he was a legal investigator in San Francisco, worked with Kamala Harris a little bit in that role. So he's done a lot of great things. He won the city's Cesar Chavez Award in May of 2024. Wow. And has a lot of other sterling things on his resume. So please join me in welcoming Milo.
Buenos dias. Thank you. Yeah. Buenos dias. Thank you so much for coming today for this important topic, Latino Vote 2024, shifting the Latino vote. I would like to start out by introducing our panelists, this esteemed panel here, who are doing lots of great work across our state. First, Senator Julie Gonzalez, Colorado State Senator, 34th District. Senadora Gonzalez is a progressive Democrat serving Northwest and downtown Denver as a state senator for Senate District 34. With roots that stretch back generations in Colorado, Julie has dedicated her life to organizing working people, Latinos, and youth around affordable housing, educational justice, and immigration rights. Can we give her a round of applause? Next on the panel, Paul Lopez, the clerk and recorder for the city of Denver. Paul Lopez is the third elective clerk and recorder of the city and county of Denver, and he made history in 2019 as the first Mexican American to hold that position. He is a Denver native, a West High School graduate. Lopez credits his upbringing in the West Side and Denver public schools with inspiring his advocacy of serving underrepresented communities. Can we give him a round of applause? Carlos Valverde, Working Families Party. Carlos Valverde is a founding state director of the Colorado Working Families Party and currently serves as the Southwest Regional Director, overseeing electoral and organizing campaigns in Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. He has led initiatives that mobilize hundreds of volunteers and engage millions of voters, helping to elect advocates for working families at various levels, from school boards to U.S. Congress. Can we give him a round of applause? Stephen Varela, Colorado State Board of Education, 3rd Congressional District. Stephen, until recently, was the member of the Colorado State Board of Education representing the 3rd Congressional District since January 1st of 2023. He is the first Latino to hold this position. Varela earned his master's degree in social work from the University of Southern California and a bachelor's of science and sociology with a minor in Chicano studies from Colorado State University of Pueblo. So we'll begin with a question for everyone that's on the panel. Please take 3 or 4 minutes to share your answers. What do you think are the most important issues for Latino voters in this 2024 election? And how is this changing? How do we think Latinos are voting this election cycle? And we'll start with Julie.
I just want to start off by saying buenos dias and thank you all so much for making the decision to be here. You all could have, there's a lot of things going on right now. It is October. And the fact that you are choosing to be here, I'm grateful and appreciative for. What I'll say, as I've been knocking doors across the state this cycle, is that the issues that are facing Latino voters are the issues that are facing Coloradans, particularly when, as we're seeing an increase in the Latino representation of voting population, we're approaching 23%, right? And so our issues are Colorado's issues. And so the things that impact all Coloradans, housing, cost of living, the economy, inflation, healthcare, right? Those are issues that impact our community more deeply because our communities are often making less money, right? Y'all may know yesterday was Latina Equal Pay Day, right? Where, and y'all, I have bad news. We actually are backsliding nationally, where we used to, it used to take till October 3rd for a Latina to earn the same amount of money as her white non-Latino male counterpart earned in all of 2023 last year, where Latinas were earning 52 cents, used to be the high watermark. This year, it actually went down, 51 cents. We have work to do, and so those economic issues are felt more acutely by our communities, right? Our colleagues at Voces Unidas, based out in the mountains, and Color, Colorado Organization for Latina Opportunity and Reproductive Rights, led on a poll, right? Latino policy agenda, Colorado Latino policy agenda. And those issues demonstrated and affirmed, right? Most Latinos, approaching 50%, I should say, are earning who earn less than $40,000 a year, are especially acutely feeling the economic crisis. And so I think that those are the issues top of mind this election.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm a CU Denver grad. Department of Political Science. And I just realized this was the building that my father used to clean back in the day. So it's good to be here in the building. Latino voters are like every other voters. And let me just say this, I'm gonna preface this because I serve in my capacity as the elected clerk and recorder in Denver, chief elections official for the county. So I'm not in the business to tell anybody how to vote. And I'm very careful how to opine on issues and to talk about things, especially when they're on the ballot, to protect the integrity of what we do, because that's what's under attack, right? The very democracy and you know that we are participating in is under attack. So I want to be mindful of that. So if at any way it seems like these are watered down questions or not, but it's also imperative for us to be able to have this discussion, especially when it comes to Latinos. Latinos, once again, are the political pawn in this election. There is a lot of nasty discourse and vitriol. There's a lot of scapegoating, once again. And then there's a lot of division. And with that, you have finger pointing. And the finger pointing that happens in this country is the same kind of finger pointing that happens right here in this city. Same finger pointing when you have folks who have been here for generations pointing at our new Americans who are out there trying to struggle, trying to survive, merely by even simply washing your windshield, but getting villainized in the public arena. There are multiple levels of citizenship, unfortunately, and how people are treated. But the worst is seeing our own Latinos treating each other in such a poor manner, participating in that discourse, taking the bait, and being, pit against each other. When in fact, the very democracy that we are participating, there's a role for everybody, and we'll go into that a little bit more. The main issue, I think, in our community is, can we unify? Can we have discourse? Can we remember where we come from? And can we work as a community, right? And part of my job and you're gonna hear my responses to some of these questions about how are we bringing this energy to the polls? How are we closing the gap in terms of our, and Latino participation in elections? And what can Latinos do who are not able to vote, but yet have a role in this democracy? That's going to be the question that we're going to face today. So,
yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. Carlos.
So I'm going to preface my statements by saying I'm the only non-elected official on the panel, but I might be the most partisan person on this panel. So I'm gonna beg your forgiveness. I come at this work and I come at this movement from a very specific position. I'm gonna try to be as nonpartisan as I can, but this is just the way I think. And so forgive me if I go a little too far in the partisan realm. And Milo, the title of this session today, The Shifting of the Latino Vote, I want to talk a little bit about that part. So we heard a little, somewhat of the statistic, but I just want to give you the top line as it is. This is what we saw in the research and in the data. In 2016, 3 in 10 Latinos voted for Donald Trump. In 2020, that increased to nearly 4 in 10 Latinos voting for Donald Trump. That was the largest increase of any ethnic group in the country in support for Donald Trump. And so the question is, why? Why is that happening? That is the subject of the talk today. And the cool news is there have been several organizations that have spent lots of money to do message research, to do polling, to do focus groups, to do all these surveys of Latino communities to begin to figure out what are those top reasons. So I want to just spend a little time talking about those top reasons of why this shift is happening. But before I go into that, I want to dispel a myth, because I hear a lot of Democratic operatives say, it's the Latinos, that's why we're losing. Well, what the research shows us is that there is no state in the country in which the Latino vote lost the election for Democrats. But there is solid evidence that in many states and many of the battleground states, Latinos were critical to the coalition for electing Democrats in 2020. So let's get into this idea of why this is happening. And I want to give a shout out to an organization called Equis Research. How many of you have heard of Equis Research? If you have not heard of Equis, you need to go to their website. They are producing such good research on our community and what, all this. Yeah, good job. Yeah. EQUIS, Equis. Yeah, like EQUIS. Okay, so the first thing that Equis and others found, and this was pretty obvious, all we had to do was look at campaign finance reports, but we found that Donald Trump spent more on Latino voter outreach than any candidate in the history of US elections. He just raw spent more. Donald Trump's #1 ad across the board, English, Spanish, doesn't matter, #1 ad with over 35 million views was done by a guy by the name of Jorge Masvidal. Raise your hand if you've heard of Jorge Masvidal. Oh, okay, a couple of folks, good, okay. This guy is a UFC fighter of Cuban descent from Florida. And the title of his ad is, Democrats Don't Deserve Our Vote. Democrats don't deserve our vote. Donald Trump paid for this ad, 35 million. So Donald Trump spent more, #1. #2, the right wing is heavily invested in changing and creating this shift within Latino, through organizations like the Libre Initiative, funded by the Koch brothers. You all know these billionaires who are funding these things. Libre Initiative, Vamos Initiative, and dozens of other small organizations and initiatives across the country. The right wing is actively funding these groups to do these things. We see them, primarily right now in Texas and Florida, but the Libre Initiative is even creating a presence here in Colorado. It's here. And so, they're going after our folks. I have heard a right-wing political operative say, just like we did with the Irish, just like we did with the Italians, give us 2 generations, we will make Latinos white and they will be voting Republican. They are heavily invested in this plan. The executive director of EQUIS, Stephanie Valencia, who is absolutely amazing, one of my heroes in this movement, she says, well, our side, and this is where I'm getting a little, I'm gonna progress. While our side is buying Spanish language radio ads, the right wing is buying Spanish language radio stations. They are buying the stations. We are buying 30-second ads while they're buying the station. We are not competing at the same level. We have 30 seconds. They're controlling the entire editorial and narrative on these stations, right? We're just not competing at the same level. And there's a third and emerging factor that we're just beginning to see. We did see it much earlier, but we didn't know how important it really was. And this is a Biden factor. And the only reason why we know it's a growing importance is because when Kamala Harris got into the race, we saw a 10-point increase in support for Kamala Harris amongst Latinos in battleground states. And so we know that there was something there with the Biden effect. For some, even when you go back to 2016, Latinos didn't really support Biden that much. They were, generally we saw that Latinos in the polling were really supportive of Bernie Sanders, and that tends to lean into that economic policies that he was promoting. So I don't like that third factor, I don't delve much into that because it's not something we can control. And that investment in our community is something we can control. And so I'm going to talk about some of the best practices a little bit later, but I wanted to take one more minute and just explain how this lack of investment in Latino voter outreach, what has been the result here in Colorado. I'll share some good news first. Right here in the city of Denver, we have 6 Latinas for the first time. Yeah, let's clap for that. On Denver City Council. We, at the state legislature, Colorado had a historic number of Latino representation at 14 state legislators. Yeah, let's clap for that. One of them is here at the state legislature. 14. How many legislators do we have in this legislature in Colorado? Anyone have a 100? Yes, that means we're 14% of the state legislature. Latinos in this state represent nearly 23% of the population, and that is based on an undercount of the US Census, which there's estimates between 5 to 10% undercount of our population. So we're 14% of the legislature, yet we represent nearly 23% of the population. So there's a lack of representation there. When you look at the constitutional statewide offices in the state, this is governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, our two US senators. Every single one of those individuals are white. Prior to the last midterm elections, when you looked at our US congressional delegation from the state of Colorado, thank goodness for Representative Joe Neguse, because that too would all have been white without him. But finally, in 2022, because of redistricting.
Carlos.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I get excited. We finally got our first Latino in Congress. So I'll go ahead and I'll pass it over. Yeah.
Thank you, Carlos.
Sorry, Milo.
Mr. Varela.
Oh, man, that was good. Well, thank you guys for being here, and thank you for allowing me to be here. But I always like to get started and thank any veterans in the room. Are there any veterans in here? Please raise your hand. Thank you for your service. I think sometimes we forget that, but I'll tell you, one of the biggest things for me that I think of and what I see, and I've got to hear other perspectives, which I think is really great, is we see this more and more and I hear it. So I just ran for Congress in the 3rd CD as well, just to give it a shot. And it was really cool because the first time ever the Republican Party ran, I ran as a Republican in 3rd CD as a Latino. Then we had a Latino run in the 5th CD, which was Dave Williams. Then we had a Latino run in the 4th CD, which was Richard Holtorf. And then we have a Latino running in CD8, which is Gabe Evans. And then we have, I think, one of our minority leaders, or was for a little bit, Richard Holtorf as well, who's also Latino. He was a migrant family, kind of good history. So it's really good to see that on both sides, they're seeing the same concerns that we're seeing. And I always tell folks, I think it's easy to say like a couple of really important words, like education is big. So when I was running in the 3rd CD, the biggest thing I heard in Garfield County with a lot of our newcomers were saying was education. How do we get access to the best education? We came here for generational wealth. How do we get it? And a lot of them were telling me, well, we get generational wealth through education. How do we get better schools? How do we perform better? And I think it's more of when you look at education, it's not just flat on top, but it's multifaceted, because one of the things we see is like we have CMAS here in Colorado. And CMAS will tell you that a lot of these districts that are minority based or Latino based are failing. They'll say you're failing your kids, you're failing your communities. But that's only a small picture of what goes on in education. I call it the portrait of a graduate. We actually miss that. We miss that there's more to education than just that snapshot. And we shouldn't be telling our communities that are Latino that they're failing. We should be encouraging them. One of the biggest things I seen when I was on the State Board of Education, when I would travel districts, I had 52 school districts in 27 counties. One of the biggest things I noticed was they were telling all the Latino communities that you need to become a tradesman. You need to go to the IBEW. You need to become a plumber, a pipe fitter. I remember when I was growing up, my dad, who was a migrant worker, said, son, you got to go to college. Because if you don't go to college, they're not going to open the same door they open for the white person. And I said, oh, wow, okay, I like that. But we're seeing this on both sides because we're buying into these narratives. Social justice. I talk about that. It's very important because I'm a Republican and I'm saying social justice. Why are you saying that as a Republican? Because we lack it in our communities. We don't see equity as equality. We're missing equality right now. I had somebody ask me when I started talking about this, they go, what kind of a Republican are you? I go, I'm a fiscal conservative and socially awesome. I get it. I used to be a Democrat. I understand what it was like on the other side. And I'll touch on that because in Pueblo County, we've seen a surge. We've seen a change. Pueblo County for 80 years was the stronghold of the Democrat Party. And last year, when I came over in 2020, I ran for Senate. First time ever in Pueblo County. I ran and the Democrats ran a white gentleman against me. The seat was always lost to the Republicans would lose it by 8 to 14 points. I came within 1,200 votes. It was huge. That momentum, I started getting more Latinos that were showing up and saying, hey, Varela, how do I become a Republican? I agree with what you're talking about. Education, social justice, equity, those things matter to me. And I feel like I'm not getting it where I'm at. So we started talking about that for the first time last year in the history of Pueblo County for the city. Not one Democrat was elected to city council, a school board, and these were Latinos that were running. And they were running based on economics. They wanted access to the economy. They keep saying the party I'm with right now isn't representing me. And you hear that a lot. And I told them this. I go, it's not about partisan party politics. It's about finding the issues, kitchen table issues, identifying those issues that matter. In our economy, in our communities, healthcare, access to healthcare, climate justice. If you look what's going on right now in Adams County, a lot of the Latino neighborhoods are right in the areas where there's pollution. And we don't have those areas, and those neighborhoods get re-gentrified. Those school districts are told that they're failing. If we don't start making a change and coming together and putting political parties aside, nothing's going to change for our community. We're never going to rise up. If we look at each other as a Republican or a Democrat or Working Families Party, we'll never see change. I was a union president, once the youngest elected federal union president. And I remember I was at an event in DC for federal labor, and AFL-CIO was there, and they were telling us, they said, you're Republican minded with Democrat needs. You guys got to vote Democrat. And I remember I stopped and I said, wait a minute, whether I'm Republican minded or not, it has nothing to do with it. My needs are constitutional. I fought for this country. I served 2 tours in Iraq. My wife served, my family served. We didn't fight for injustice. We fought for justice and access for all. It didn't matter your color, your race, your creed. Let's start building this country together. And I think that's what we're seeing right now, is that there's so much division because we're saying, oh, well, that's Stephen Varela. Oh, he's a Republican. Hey, watch out. Or that's so-and-so, they're a Democrat. Hey, let's back off. But if we started coming together, we could fight these problems. Social justice, climate change. I mean, talk about it. She talked about inequity. My wife's a psych nurse practitioner. She sees patients just like a psychiatrist. Nurse practitioners are 80 to 90% female. My wife graduated from UCCS. She's a Latina working in Pueblo. She sees the same patients, doctors are predominantly male. And my wife prescribes the same way, intakes the same way, does everything exactly the same. And she makes 60 to 50% less than him with the same caseload. We should be talking about those injustices because they keep telling our Latino women and females, become a nurse, don't become a doctor. It's like telling our young boys, go to the trade, go to the trade, go to the trade, don't go to college. How do we fix this? How do we change that conversation?
Thank you so much. This next question is for Senator Gonzalez. Do you feel that the Democrats are taking the Latino vote for granted?
I very much appreciate the question, and I think deeply about this, because what you've heard in the responses to the initial question, right, are that one, we're not a monolith, and two, that we've got a lot of issues, right? What I appreciate about the shift that we have seen in the Democratic Party this cycle, and quite frankly, just since this summer, as the head of the top of the ticket, right, Kamala Harris, as a biracial woman of color, is transforming the way that Democratic outreach is happening to communities of color across the country, here in Colorado, and particularly in swing states. What we've often seen is, what former Representative Joe Salazar used to call the Latino booty call to come election time, right? We're like 2 weeks before the election, a bunch of money would come out and a bunch of people would be like, hey, we need to get the Latino vote out, guys, let's get together. I appreciate Carlos Valverde's point, right, around Republicans are investing more money in like far earlier. For too long, I would argue and submit, or maybe concede to the point that the Democratic Party has done outreach, it's just been time too late, right? And then has been outreaching to communities around, maybe a single issue, right? What we've seen nationally is that Kamala Harris, as a woman of color, is saying, I'm not only going to talk to you about the fact that I'm a woman of color. I'm going to talk to you about the issues that matter deeply to you. I'm going to talk to you about the economy, immigration, healthcare, right? And I really respect, I actually disagree with her on the policy that she is promoting around immigration, but I also respect the fact that she's not saying one thing to brown people and saying another thing to white people, right? Like, I respect the fact that I can disagree with her, whether she is speaking to one community or the other, right? And that, I think, is a level of nuance that is a shift in strategy and approach. I also want to lift up and highlight the work that is happening in CD8, right? That is playing out right here in Colorado. We have 2 Latinos running for a district where Latino voters will decide who we send to Congress, right? And the ways in which the micro-targeting that is taking place within the Democratic Party to engage Latinas, to engage Latinos, to actually discern, right, that first generation or third generation or young people, right, have different perspectives and have different issues that they care about. I'm so grateful to the ways in which the Democratic Party is doing that work, listening deeply, and then responding in kind. And I think that that is going to be what it takes. The last point I'll just say is that Latino voters are not like, hey, I can knock your door once and then call it good, right? We require we are a people rooted in our oral traditions, in relationship, right? And so you cannot come and just do a GOTV knock on October the 27th and then call it good, right? That engagement needs to happen much earlier on. And so we are like high touch, high contact voters. We require that work. And I think that is reflective in the campaigns and the approaches that we're seeing. The warning that I will say to partisans and to non-partisans is that ignore us at your own peril, right? And that goes for that goes for Republicans, that goes for Democrats, and that goes for independents as well, right? And so I think the ways in which the Democratic Party has been proactively engaging is exciting and welcomed. I just welcome the fact that a woman of color at the top of the ticket is fundamentally transforming the way in which that outreach happens. Cool.
Thank you, Senator Gonzalez. Next question is for Mr. Varela. Are Republicans making inroads with Latino voters? And if so, on what issues?
I would say that the Republican Party's made a lot of inroads. I forgot your name, I'm sorry. Carlos mentioned it earlier. There's a lot of money being spent in the elections. And I think you see that on both sides, whether it's coming from Bloomberg. On my way up, I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about how all the billionaires that are spending on each side this year. There's some new names out there, and they talked a little bit about Pennsylvania, how now that Kamala Harris and the Trump campaign are both putting a lot of money in there to get the Latino vote, because they're realizing that we are the future of this country, and the way you're going to make a change is by getting to us. But one of the things I could tell you with the Republican Party is about a year ago, I worked a really good program for CD8 to develop Latino outreach, because one of the things I said is, I told a group of them, I said, if you guys want to engage with Latino voters, you got to meet us where we're at. That's one of the biggest things you keep forgetting. And when you run, and it was really good, actually. A good friend of mine who is a Democrat told me this. He goes, Steven, he goes, the problem with Republicans, you keep running PMS. And I go, PMS? He goes, pale, male, and stale. And so I said, okay, that's a good one. I never heard that before. So what we did was we actually worked on recruiting strategies and talked about how could we get our community involved and engaged, because not all of us as Latinos are, because if you notice some of the doors you'll knock when you talk to somebody, you might hit them on an issue when it comes to healthcare, and it might be like the abortion issue. A lot of them are very staunch Catholics, and they might go one way or another. So you got those targeted voters you could speak with, and just engaging in those communities as Republicans. One of the things we've been able to do is really start identifying Latinos to run. And I've talked about this. I said, if our goal is to bring balance back to the state of Colorado, we have to start finding the right Latinos or the right people to run in those communities. So we're not going to run in like House District 47, which is 90 to 80% Anglo. You're going to run, if you're in a district that's predominantly Latino, you should find that small business owner. Right now, Latinos, we're the largest, fastest growing small business owners. We're union leaders. If you look at the majority of the unions, even though they vote Democrat on the national level, a lot of the people that are working in the labor unions that are memberships, 80 to 70 to 60% of them are conservative voters. Just start engaging them as a conservative voter. After Vietnam, the majority of your service members after Vietnam are Latino, went to the military. Our privilege was, if we wanted to go to college, you could go to the Army, get a GI Bill, come back, use that GI Bill, and go to college. So these are things that are very important that we're seeing that's changing in the Republican Party and identifying it. Now, there are bad actors. Don't get me wrong. There are some people, like you'll have the Libre Initiative. What they'll do is I call it tokenizing our community. We shouldn't be tokenized. And that was one of my biggest problems when I left the Democrat Party. I got tired of hearing those conversations like, oh, well, we don't care how smart he is. We just need a Latino to run in that district. Don't worry, he's nothing. Or, hey, you know what? We really want to win right now. So we're going to make this Latino a Senate president. We don't care who he is, but we need to be the first to do it so we can get more votes and win this down ballot. That kind of conversations destroys our community because we are allowing people to treat us like we're a tool or a toy, and then they shelf us. And the example I always give people is when I look at it is for Senator Salazar. I mean, we fought hard as a Latino community. I remember I was knocking doors as I was the chair of the Latino Democratic Forum at the time, and I was a precinct chair down in Pueblo. And I was hitting doors. I had George Otterby with me. We were out there. We were, we were talking to everybody. We said, we got to get Salazar. We want a Latino. And then we would even tell people, they would say, well, I'm conservative. And it was a Latino guy. And I'd say, hey, man, it doesn't matter about party. It's about culture. Let's get our gente elected. And so we were getting it. We were knocking on the doors. We were talking to people. Then Salazar resigns. And then instead of coming back to that Latino community that worked hard, who do they go to? They go and pick one of their buddies in the back room. It becomes Michael Bennett. Why do we keep getting shafted? It shouldn't happen that way. And so one of the things I tell people is they say, well, you went to the Republican side, which is a really hard party to even do anything in. I go, I showed up as a Republican, I ran for office, and then I didn't win my election. Then I got a phone call and said, we need you to fill the vacancy and sit on the State Board of Education. Nobody said we want you because you're brown. They said, we want you because you're a master's in clinical social work. They go, we want you because we've seen the hard work you did. If we start looking at our community that way and stop tokenizing it, then it's going to be a problem if we continue. And that's what like Libre Initiative, that's all they want to do. If you ever watch some of their articles, they're a conservative group. I should be praising them. I'm not going to praise them because all they're doing is saying, we want your community to vote for us. They're not saying we want to empower your community. They're not saying, here's the issues or problems with your community. They're not saying we want to see you win by doing this and this and this. That's not happening. They're saying we want to get you elected so when you get elected, you can continue our mission of keeping industry in China, not bringing industry back and creating jobs. So I know I went a little long, but that's just.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The next question is for Clerk Lopez. We keep hearing about Latinos are not voting. Do you feel that Latinos are actually voting? And do certain issues or voter outreach strategies work to inspire our Latinos to vote? And what might we see in Latino voter turnout during this election cycle?
Thank you for the question. Turnout depends on what's on the ballot. Turnout also depends on who's knocking on your door, who's asking for your vote. And if neither one of those things hit you, you're not going to come out. That's why you have a difference between, voting in municipal elections versus a presidential. This presidential, we're expecting in Denver 85 to 90% turnout, whereas in an off-cycle election, especially let's say a coordinated, what we'll have next year with the school board and maybe a few issues on the ballot, you're going to probably see a peak above 32%. It depends on what's on the ballot and who's asking for the vote. 36 million eligible Latino voters in the country. I don't want to talk about the country, I want to talk about Denver, okay? That's my jurisdiction, and that's where I know it well. Latinos are in Montbello, they're in Green Valley Ranch, heavy presence in GES, Sunnyside, parts of the north side, all the way from West Colfax down all the way into Harvey Park. In Sunnyside, in Sun Valley, those are also the areas where people are, and we have numbers to show it, are eligible but not registered. And if you look at that map, it's the same map where folks are receiving their ballots but not turning them in. And I don't understand that because it is so easy to vote in Denver. We now have 45 drop boxes. We have one in Globeville now. We moved the one from the police district station in District 1 to the Aslan Rec Center. Right? You get it. You can clap for that one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The culture, so the ability to do so is easy. We don't have to stand in line for hours. You don't have to wait until election day. There is no cutoff, thank you to the legislature, in terms of when you can register to vote. There are now new requirements that no matter what county you're in, the threshold to print ballots in Spanish is now lower. Thank you to the legislature. We have the gold standard here. But isn't that the case in our community? Are we doing enough to make sure that our community is able to vote? From our end, making it accessible is there. Well, then what is missing if it's so easy? Right? 18 through 24 are the ones that's a sweet spot. Voters that are 18 through 24 are receiving that ballot but not turning it in. But they are also the ones that are going to determine an election. So how we message to that group is important. But here's another factor as well. Latinos are not a monolith. Thank you, Senator Gonzalez, for saying that. Because not every household is a household of Latino voters. You may have a young Latino voter that is 18, and then their parents are not even citizens. As a matter of fact, dreamers are now going to be turning 50 years old. That means they've spent a whole entire lifetime dreaming without that path to citizenship. So it depends. There's two factors in terms of how people vote and what drives them to vote. One, a sense of duty, and two, their family and their circle and pressure from there. So when we talk about strategies, we have to have those conversations. We have to fight misinformation that's saying, well, you don't matter. We don't matter. No, we do matter. And yes, it is counted. And I know the clerk and he can give you a call and talk to you. We'll bring you in and show you how it's counted. But what are we doing beyond just election day? For those of us and those of you that are voting in every single election, congratulations. That's a slow clap. What are you doing 364 other days of the year? What are we doing for the folks that are not registered to vote, who also have a role in this democracy? I tell you what we're doing. We've instituted a whole engagement program. We're working every single day of the year. Not every single day, my staff has time off. But throughout the year, we're engaging. We're talking about roles in democracy. And that's what we have to be able to do. We can't just show up at election time and a last minute. Can you do me a favor? Yeah. Hold this sign up. That's printed from our office. That's available. It doesn't require a voter registration to put that in your yard or window. For folks who are not eligible to vote yet, they still can. They can still encourage people to vote, and that's what people are able to do. Think about our young people who have to do duck and cover drills, not because of tornadoes, but because of active shooters. Think about the times that they are living, what young people are facing. What is keeping them from coming to the polls and just dropping that ballot off? What about the young people who are almost voters, but they show up in mass when they're marching about the school board or immigration reform or showing up at the state capitol, right? Think about how we are engaging from that perspective. And that is universal. That applies to the Black community, that applies to our Asian community, and as a matter of fact, working class communities all around Denver. So I'm sorry, that's what it is.
Thank you so much. The next question is for Mr. Valverde. You conduct a lot of polls across the Southwest. What have you seen as an effective tactic to outreach to Latino voters? And have you seen a difference nationally as you see in the Southwest?
Thank you. And my folks did prepare one more point about Colorado. I felt like I just really had to share with you because it's so important. I talked about the lack of representation, the lack of investment we're seeing in voter outreach to Latino communities. So we went to NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials. And we asked NALEO, well, how many Latino elected officials are there in the state of Colorado? And they said, about 156 is what we count. And I was like, oh, sounds pretty good. How many elected offices are there in the state of Colorado? I want to get this number right. There are 8,605 elected offices in the state of Colorado. That means we are 1.8% of those elected offices. In a state named Colorado, Latinos are 1.8% of elected offices. We've heard that we're about 1 in 5 of the residents of Colorado. We've heard about voter turnout and how important that is. We're less than 1 in 10 of actual voters in Colorado. Even though we're nearly 20% of eligible voters in Colorado, we're only about 9% of those who actually vote. And so while we have great laws in place for Latinos to vote here in Colorado, we still have a long way to go in engaging them. But there is hope, and I want to talk a little bit about what you asked about what we're seeing across the region, across the country, and there is hope from these 2022 midterm elections, especially when it comes to this rightward swing of Latino voters. So what we saw in 2022 is that 62%, and these are from congressional races, 62% of Latinos ended up supporting the Democrats in those. And that is the exact same figure, 62% that supported Democrats in 2020. So we effectively stopped the shift, that rightward swing stopped. But the most interesting thing was in the battleground states where Latinos represented a heavy voting bloc, Nevada and Arizona, we actually seen it begin to shift back towards Democratic support for Latino folks, nearly to the same extent as it was in 2016. So we looked at about 68 to 67% of Latinos supporting Democrats in the US Senate races there, Catherine Mastos Cortez and Mark Kelly. And I want to talk about the question, what have we seen that's effective? Well, those two candidates put the money in. Like the senadora said, they both invested early. Mastos started campaigning to Latinos in March for a November election. Most campaigns don't even start until way after Labor Day. Like we heard, it's the Latino booty call. They come to us in the last 2 or 3 weeks before an election. So we have to start early. The other thing that they realized is that we can't be tokenized. We don't just want the information translated in Spanish. We want to see ourselves reflected in that campaign material. Use cultural values that we have that put us as the protagonists in elections. We want to be that empowered community in this. Like, I think we agree on that point. And then you heard a little bit about some of those research tested tactics. We have to be multimodal. That means you can't just send digital ads to Latino young folks. They need to get a phone call. They need to get a door knock. They need to get a mailer. Yes, digital ads too, a text message. The more times you can contact the person. Senator Mark Kelly had a goal of reaching every Latino 10 times in the course of election. And he didn't care whether that Latino was Republican or Democrat. He was going after every single one of those votes. And they used messaging. We weren't just GOTV, go out and vote, to persuade the Latino community. Latino community is one of the most, what they describe as politically conflicted. We're not really aligned with either political party, or the two major political parties, I should say. And so persuasion really helps us in making a decision and getting out to vote. This is what the research is telling us. And so what Mastos and Kelly did, what we saw the Republicans do is they used a lot of persuasion around crime and immigration to try to get the Latino vote and get them angry. And it's a really similar tactic to what they use in the white community. It didn't really work for them in Nevada and Arizona. What Mark Kelly and Mastos did, they used the pocketbook issues of housing. In fact, we did some recent polling. A 5% rate cap on rents was the #1 issue in the most recent poll we did for Latinos. But it's always education. It's always jobs and employment. These are the things that Latinos care about, and this is what we have to focus on. This is the cycle and moving forward. Like we say, it can't just stop on this election. We have to keep doing this year round.
Thank you so much, Carlos. We're kind of running out of time, but there's a couple questions that are really important. And let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the southern border and immigration. How much do border and immigration issues play for Latino voters? And do you see that changing? We can start with Senator Gonzalez.
It is a universally shared value that everybody wants the opportunity to feel safe. It is a universally shared value that you would do anything for your kids. I don't care what political party, I don't care where you were born, right? Those are two fundamental human truths. Our policies right now are deeply broken. And for 20 years, the DREAM Act is old enough to get a beer. First introduced in 2001, we have still not seen congressional action on the most bipartisan of the issues that then relates to the broader set of issues surrounding comprehensive immigration reform. Both parties have kicked this around like a political football, and much harm and suffering and death has occurred as a result. Earlier this week, excuse me, I ran into a woman who I interned with 20 years ago, Kat Rodriguez, who was a lead organizer and founder of Derechos Humanos, an organization based out of Tucson, Arizona, that supported immigration policy, immigrant rights, and quite frankly, over the past 20 years, more and more of her work was working with the morgues, working with the hospitals in order to try to identify the remains and get those remains back to their families and their countries of origin, right? Our current broken policies are, quite frankly, killing people. Now we're seeing responses from both parties that I think are frustrating and in many ways prioritize sealing of a border over human dignity. But we're also in a place where if you look at the long-term strategy from the conservative right, it has been make life so difficult and so untenable that when it finally comes to the point to negotiate, that we'll take whatever crumbs we can get. And I think right now that long-term strategy advanced by the xenophobic right, that's where we're at, right? You're seeing even Democrats adopt that. Okay, well, I guess we do need to, crack down at the border, right? I worry for what the policy environment could look like come January 2025. I also want to acknowledge my district of the north side, the west side of downtown Denver, right, has welcomed over 40,000 Venezolanos over the past few years, right? Our schools are welcoming and integrating kids. We have seen the ways in which over just the past few weeks, Aurora came up not once, but twice during our presidential debate, right, between Trump and Harris. I want to just take a moment and talk about a policy that, again, we didn't talk about this and I want to take just a couple of minutes to wonk out on this because this matters. Housing should be a right, not a privilege, right? We have seen the ways in which rising costs of rent are exacerbating the housing crisis, leading to people experiencing homelessness, at risk of homelessness, getting evicted for the first time, people who are working full time and who are still experiencing evictions, skyrocketing this year in Denver, particularly now that the COVID relief dollars are coming to an end, right? We've run out of those funds. We have seen this year, I ran along with Representative Mandy Lindsay out of Aurora, policy to protect housing for tenants, right? So that way, if you have mold, if you have the roof caving in from your apartment, if you have no heat, right? That you as a renter have the ability to hold that landlord accountable, right? That's policy that we passed just this year in the state legislature. Why did that matter? Because we'd heard from tenants, many of whom, again, that working class, the folks at the edges of the economic spectrum, Latinos, right? We'd heard, hey, I've asked my landlord to fix this thing. They're not fixing the thing. Come to find out, CBZ management, right? An out-of-state landlord that is operating multiple apartment complexes in the Denver metro area. Turns out, City of Aurora starts cracking down on CBZ management, and then, like clockwork, they say, oh, well, we can't address these warrant of habitability claims because actually these apartment complexes have been taken over by Venezuelan gangs. That then helps to spin up the lie that then gets repeated by Donald Trump at the debate on September the 11th, right? Now, have there been 10 gang members, Tren de Aragua gang members identified in Aurora? Yes. Have there been gangs in Aurora and Denver and everywhere else in the country? Yes. Have Republican local elected officials helped to advance those falsehoods and narratives? Yes. Until it got to the point at which it got repeated on this national stage, and now you've seen the Republican mayor, Mike Kaufman, backtrack and be like, actually, just kidding. No, my bad. Aurora's not being taken over and overrun. We have a couple of bad actors. Da, 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 da. I named this, and I wanted to take a moment to just go a little bit deeper into the policy, because that rhetoric of dehumanizing people, that rhetoric of painting everybody as a gang member or a drug dealer, or during the vice presidential debate just a couple of days ago, right? J.D. Vance characterized children, unaccompanied minors, right, as drug mules, right? And the fact in which we are living in an environment in which that is okay is actually not okay. And we have to vote accordingly this November, because that election then determines upon the extent to which we will have a playing field in which we recognize human dignity and respect, or in which we don't, and we're going to take whatever crumbs we can get. The last point is this. We saw that a Republican majority-led bipartisan bill that I, again, deeply disagreed with, but that Republicans largely advanced, right? Senator Michael Bennet was involved in that. They presented a bill in February of this year. They said, this is a bill that we, Democrats and Republicans in Congress, can get behind. Trump shut it down because he would have rather had the issue to bat around in this election cycle now. And you see that strategy playing out in Aurora. You see they've shut down one apartment complex, left hundreds of people homeless. They're now threatening to shut down 2 additional apartment complexes as soon as the end of this month. Y'all, winter's coming. This is happening not in an abstract manner, not only along the border, but also right here in our communities.
Thank you so much. We have about 8 minutes left. But I
Sorry.
want to give the opportunity for Mr. Varela to comment on this. How much do border and immigration issues play into the minds of Latino voters?
You know, one of the biggest things when I think about it, sometimes I feel like the whole border issue is by design meant to fail. Because it's a talking point, it's an election point, it's something that they use one way or another. But one of the biggest problems that I see with it is we need to treat people with dignity and respect. And when they're coming over the border, we need to make sure that when they're coming, that they're safe, they have somewhere to go, they have a house, they have a job. Now, if they made it into this country, it's our responsibility to take care of them. And we need to stop talking about our newcomers, as I like to call them, as illegals or immigrants. Because I mean, I would hate if somebody called me that, or, you know, the other thing that I can't stand is when people say the right way, you got to come the right way. Our system is broken. So what is the right way? Do you know what I mean? What's the wrong way? Because they only talk about the southern border, both sides. Nobody talks about the northern border. Nobody talks about the other people that are coming in on boats, but they always come after our community. We're the drug dealers. We're the mules. We're the problem. We're destroying society. We're the undesirables. How do we change that narrative? The only way to change that narrative is by addressing the issue. Now, when you look at it, the political design of it is, oh, we're going to strengthen this. We're going to create more border patrol agents. We're going to do this or that or vice versa. Or we're going to make it to where when you're coming over, we're going to have something for you to get ready. But that's not true. We don't. We house these people like they're animals. That's not right. These are humans. How do we not treat people with dignity and respect? It shouldn't be a political issue. It should be an issue of humanity. We are the greatest country. I think of the Statue of Liberty. Give me you're hungry, you're tired, you're poor. That's what we were built on. We were all undesirables. And guess what we did? We built the greatest nation. It doesn't matter when you're talking about somebody, and I see this problem more and more and more, is they use it as a way to get us excited or upset. So I could go to one community and I'll talk to newcomers that have been here 20, 30 years that were dreamers. They'll be pissed. Like, man, I didn't have it that easy. I have a lady, really good friend of mine. She's an entrepreneur. She owns a cleaning business down in Pueblo. Her and her family, she was born in Mexico. And she goes, Stephen, my mom for 18 years has been trying to become a citizen. She went back to Mexico. They told her to pay this amount of money in Mexico, a corrupt government. You got to pay this, you got to pay that. And now she can't come back. They have her waiting. Our current system is creating these problems. And we're not saying anything about that. Those are problems. You know what she told me? She said, you know, my mom called me and she goes, oh, mija, should I just come over the border with the others? Because they said I could get citizenship right away. They are politicizing this. People shouldn't be treated that way. We are not animals. And that's our future vote block as Latinos. Whether they become a Democrat, a Republican, working party, whatever it might be, that is the future of this nation. And if we're not going to work to come together on the right, finding the right path and get away from the political side of it and actually come as a team, whether you're a D or an R, you know, I always think of DNR as do not resuscitate, DNR. If we can't break away from that, we're never going to see change. Like Senator Julie said, we see it right now with housing. You know, some people will say housing is a right or it's not, it's a privilege. It doesn't matter how you see it. We need people to be in houses. And we see it more and more. And then they try to politicize that in 2022. They talked about the houseless project. They try to use it as a political standpoint. Both sides did. Let's talk about the houseless project. We have people that are homeless, that are working, that can't afford to live in this country. That is not humane. We talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We are not providing it for citizens of America or newcomers at that. We talk about jobs. We don't have industry in this country. We talk about social issues. We can't even fight for social issues because half of the social issues we vote for, we can't fund them. And then the class that keeps getting taxed is the middle working class. Well, I don't quote me on the number, but if I remember right, 40% or something like that of Latinos right now are small business owners. They're energizing this SBA. And guess what? Who's going to get taxed more? Our community. I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay for things that are right. I'm just saying we should look at the problems. We have a wealth gap that is crazy. We have people we have more billionaires today than we had 40 years ago. Why aren't they paying their fair price? I think it was not Bloomberg, it was the one that owns Burger. Yeah, maybe it was Bloomberg, but he was saying that his secretary pays more than him in taxes. That's crazy. That should never happen. We have families that are having to choose childcare or a job. You got to be kidding me. We have kids where parents are saying, I want my son or daughter to go to that school in that district because it's better, but I can't drive them there, so I'm stuck here. Stuck here, forget about that you want to go to another school. Why are you stuck here? Because I have to work 30 miles away. When you go down to Aspen, Colorado, I went down there, you go to Newcastle, there are parents that are newcomers that get up every morning at 4 a.m, get on a bus. They don't see their kids until 8 o'clock at night because they get bused to go work in Aspen, Vail, Eagle. These are our newcomers. This is how we're treating them. They don't see their kids. Who is raising that generation? I tell people, if you educate a generation, you will control your future. We are not controlling any future right now because we are not educating that next generation. We are teaching them that all they can be is a service worker. We aren't telling them that they could be a doctor, a lawyer, a business owner. We aren't giving them the opportunities they deserve. That is the problem with our immigration system. Unless we come together and fix it and stop letting it be by design destroy our country, we are never going to see change. And quit talking about just the southern border. It is more than that. They are allowing us to fail.
Thank you so much. I know we're at time. I just want to let everybody know that we are at 10 o'clock, but I want to give Clerk Lopez and Carlos Valverde to also give their input on this question. Clerk Lopez.
Well, I'm not going to repeat anything that you said. You've heard it from a Democrat and Republican, right? The job is now to change those narratives, to continue that narrative, and that narrative of integrity, the narrative of human rights, right, of survival, and make sure that that becomes part of the platform. And it is those kind of things that make sure that you put folks like that who question, who seek to dehumanize, who seek to really remove the humanity from people in check. The debates, and you see the discourse it's rancid. And we don't have to go around repeating that, or even, we already see it. As somebody who oversees elections, I have to address one thing, and I want to make sure everybody understands. And I know that I'm speaking to the choir here. The debate and the conversation around immigrants and folks who are coming to this country is terrible, and it's centered around well, they're voting in our elections. They're not. And I can tell you, as the clerk and recorder, the last thing somebody ever wants to do after coming thousands of miles across a burning desert and having to bury folks along the way, leave everything that they've ever loved behind, is put themselves in peril by participating in a low turnout election. The last thing somebody wants to do is to out themselves in a scary environment like this one. And I can tell you, as the clerk and recorder, our system is secure. We work with different state agencies. We work with a national agency called ERIC that works to identify folks who have moved from one to the other to make sure that people are not voting in two separate states. And the rate of fraud, if there is any, is, get this, 0.0006. Statistically speaking, nada. Statistically speaking, zilch. And as a matter of fact, our system is so secure, it is so transparent and accountable, that we will even make sure that if you are a clerk and recorder that has violated your oath, we will catch you for sabotaging our system, and the justice system will take care of that for 9 years. It is not us, it is not Latinos, I'm sorry, Senator.
No.
It is not undocumented folks committing fraud, as you've seen yesterday.
If you haven't listened to the closing sentencing statement from the judge in yesterday's Tina Peters
Oh, it's
case,
great.
it is
It's great.
chef's kiss.
Yep.
I wish our media outlets would just repost and like print out his sentencing statement in full, because it is worth your time.
Thank you so much. Carlos?
The line that stuck out to me was, "You're a charlatan peddling snake oil." I just was like, whoa, those were words. I don't have much to add on the immigration, but what I'll remind us is we are in the midst of an election. And you're probably tired of hearing it's the most important election of our lifetime, but it seems like every election at this point is the most important election of our lifetime. Our community needs outreach. Our community needs empowerment. We need to be building a pipeline of candidates, building organizations that does relational civic engagement, that understands our culture. And so my charge to this group, it's not too late. You can start today. Go knock on some doors, join an organization, do something to be politically active, do something to empower our comunidad.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I would like to thank our audience for being here today, and also the folks at home watching or listening. And of course, our incredible panel of experts. Can we give them a round of applause?
Great job, man.